our county commissioners voted to give themselves a giant raise. But no, that was not on the official recording.
Of course not.
It is now.
It is now.
Sorry.
Thank you, Cameron. Appreciate you. Looks to me like we have a quorum and we should get started here. Welcome. No, just a moment. Good. Let's bring out this one.
We've got something going on with
49.
audio feedback.
Is it?
Dentist would shudder, I'm sure.
I know. Yeah.
All right,
All right.
we are ready to go.
Let's get this thing moving. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to this meeting of the Bend Metropolitan Planning Organization. So nice to see everyone here today on this gorgeous late spring afternoon. How about we go around the room and introduce ourselves, please? Andrea, would you start first?
Andrea Napoli, Bend MPO.
Oriole Mendez, City of Bend. Bill Chang, Deschutes County Commissioner.
Bob Townsend, ODOT Area Manager.
Greg Bryant, Deschutes Rural Wood.
And Tyler Deakey, Bend MPO Manager.
And I'm Barb Campbell. I serve on the Bend City Council, and I'm also chair of the MPO. Tyler will tell us about our hybrid meeting guidelines.
All right, the meeting is being recorded. There is for those online, there's a closed captioning function you can activate and raise your hand if you have any questions.
Thank you. Our third item on the agenda is opportunity for public comment. Is there anyone that would like to address the board? Seeing none, we do have another opportunity at the end of our meeting. That will bring us over to item number 4. These are our meeting minutes. I would happily entertain a motion to approve our minutes.
I move to approve the April 26, 2023 Budget Committee and May 19, 2023 policy board draft meeting minutes as presented.
Thank you. We've got a motion from Mr. Mendez and a second from Mr. Shane. All those in favor, please raise your hand, say aye.
Aye.
Aye, that is unanimous. Thank you so much. That gets us to item number 5. This is the 2023-2024 approved budget, public hearing and adoption. Tyler, you want to start us off for this one?
So I will kind of walk through these pretty quickly because we adopted our work program last month, and the work program is essentially an expanded version of our budget document that we send to ODOT and our federal partners. This document is the document we submit to the state of Oregon for budget purposes. And so we have basically the same set of slides as we presented last month and presented to the budget committee. Anybody, do you want me to walk through these, or do you want to just kind of jump to the end and open the public hearing? Give a preference.
I think we can just pause a second while everyone looks at that slide. And then if there are no questions, I think we can go ahead and jump forward. Seeing nods of head. Thank you,
Yeah.
Tyler.
I'll skip through all of them.
Great. So maybe
The actual
just a
budget
little,
slides.
yeah.
So here we have, just this slide just talks about the background of where we've been. We always hold a review meeting with ODOT, Federal Highway Administration, Federal Transit Administration staff. We did that in early February, excuse me. We reviewed the draft work program with the Technical Advisory Committee and Policy Board also in February. We had our budget committee meeting in late April. We opened a public review period for our work program in May. And then we had our policy board approval of our work program last month, as I said, and seeking approval of the budget document today. That's
Great.
it. Unless
Thank
you have any
you.
questions.
Thank you. Any questions for Tyler or staff? Not, I will open a public hearing. Is there anyone that would like to address the board regarding our work program and budget? Seeing none, I will close the public hearing and look for a motion.
This is essentially what was presented 2 meetings ago.
Thank you, that's right, Ariel. We had our budget committee meetings a couple of weeks ago, and the budget committee recommended that we adopt this budget as proposed. And now this is the step where we need to formally adopt. Thank you for spelling that out for
Yeah,
everyone.
no,
Thank
no.
you, Tyler.
Thank you. I move to approve the fiscal year 2023-24 approved budget and make appropriations by means of resolution 2023-04.
Second.
Great, we have a motion from Mr. Mendez and a second from Mr. Chang. All those in favor, please say aye. Raise your hand. And that is unanimous as well. Thank you so much. That's great. That means we're off on another good year of work for our communities.
Thank you.
Yeah, that's great. All right, that gets us to agenda item number 6. This is approval of a promissory note for fiscal year 2022-2023. It's a year-end loan from the City of Bend General Fund. Tyler?
All right, so the MPO, governmental accounting standards don't allow governmental entities to carry a negative cash balance at the end of the fiscal year into the new fiscal year. We, the MPO, are fully supported by grants from ODOT and Federal Highway and Federal Transit Administration funds. And with that, we work on a reimbursement basis. And so we are typically 1 to 2 months behind in terms of the cash payments for the work that we do. And so what we always do at the end of the fiscal year is the city gives us essentially an overnight loan to be able to close out the fiscal year budget. And then we pay them back as we receive our funds from our grants reimbursement requests to ODOT. And so what we're proposing is authorizing the note would just authorize an operating loan from the City of Bend MPO. The amount would not exceed $100,000, and it would be repaid in July, as I said, with grant funds as we receive them. So that's it. Any questions?
All right.
So is there, I mean, it sounds like the grant requirements wouldn't allow to build up a reserve or something to avoid this. I mean, it seems like this works fine.
Yeah.
But it seems like in some ways it would be nicer to have the MPO be more self-sufficient. And it seems like a reserve balance would accomplish that, but is that not permitted by the funding sources?
No, well, 'cause we can only seek reimbursement for work that we've done. And so with that, it's always a dollar for dollar. And so there's really I don't think there's any means for us to really build up a reserve because we can't see funding in advance of our invoices, if that makes sense.
I wouldn't anticipate any city in the foreseeable future. And if this is no big ordeal, then I think it's fine. It's just sort of quirky, but it works. So
It's an excellent question. Ariel and I, of course, we had the city budget process recently. And yeah, in the city budget, there are reserves except for departments, the city in general. So that's an excellent question. So any other questions?
Very similar questions when I first joined the MPO board during my first budgetary cycle.
Right? Yeah, no, that's an excellent question. Thank you, Ari. We appreciate the city of Bend.
don't break
for-
it.
Yeah,
But it does seem kind of silly
right?
that this whole rigmarole just to.
I mean, is it a tremendous amount of time? I mean, it doesn't seem like it's not a huge ordeal, is it?
No,
Okay, well then that's
no, it's
fine.
pretty straight. I mean, we will spend more time today, probably discussing it than the actual process.
And with that,
No, I
I'm
mean,
looking for a
I'm saying it's a bad thing. I'm saying
motion.
It's a pretty fast process inside at the through the city's financial department.
Thank you. Excellent. Those are all excellent questions. Thank you. Any other questions? Nope. All right. Would anyone like to make a motion?
I move to authorize the policy chair to sign the promissory note to document the reimbursement practices of the city of Bend and Bend MPO and state law regarding year-to-year municipal budgets.
Second.
Thank you. We have a motion from Mr. Mendez and a second from Mr. Chang. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Raise your hands. That is unanimous. Thank you, everyone. That gets us up to agenda item number 7. The previous items have been more in the housekeeping department.
Yes.
This one looks more interesting.
Yes.
Tyler, would you like to take us through this?
Yes, so this item is, we're going to talk a little bit about a federal Safe Streets and Roads for All grant application. And so the current Federal Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, or IIJA, created many new grant programs, and one of them is the Safe Streets and Roads for All. The program includes funding for both planning and capital investments. The Bend Transportation Safety Action Plan is completed. It was completed actually in early 2019, and so a lot of work was done in 2018. Since that time, many of the high crash locations identified in the plan have either had projects through the dot STIP or the city CIP, or they will have projects through the GEO bond, the city CIP, or the upcoming. So we would like to submit a grant application to update the Transportation Safety Action Plan, and then be able to, our ultimate goal then is to get that document updated and then use that to then seek capital funding through the Federal Safe Streets for All grant program. And through that update, what we'd like to do is review and update high crash location data, take a more detailed look at those high crash locations, including a deeper look at the walking and biking crashes. We want to develop concept level planning improvements for high crash locations, because we know in the current safety action plan, there were a couple of concepts that were developed, and there's a lot of, I would say, concern as to whether those concepts are feasible, from a pure engineering standpoint. And so we want to be able to dive a little bit further into those in this update and have concepts that we can then move into their design process with local funding or apply for federal funding. And then there's just other components of the plan that we'd like to update in terms of the speed management techniques are identified in there and a few other things like that. And as part of this process, we would potentially like to secure consultant services to help us prepare the application. They would help us prepare that. It would be a time and materials basis contract with a not to exceed amount of $10,000. And ultimately what we're thinking, I've been meeting with city staff to talk about this. We'll be reaching out to ODOT staff. I've reached out to Deschutes County staff as well, because they are concerned with submitting a grant application for the same thing. We are thinking that we're going to be applying for 180 to 200,000. So it's pretty sizable grant application that we would put in for this process. It'll meet our timeline. These applications are due July 10th, so less than a month from now. So we've already developed some of the text for this, but we would like to have a consultant potentially help us step through that process to make sure it's as well organized as possible. So today, we're just seeking two things: authorizing us to submit the grant application, and then secondly, to potentially seek consultant support services.
Who would provide the 20% match if we were successful, Tyler, for the grant?
It would be, most likely it would have to be the city of Bend, but I have to provide that.
Did you know what, Sarah, what the city of Bend was applying for on the capital side?
That's a great question. What they wanted to do, I mean, so the city of Bend submitted an application in the first round of these funds, the first round of funding to this program. And they did it was kind of a kitchen sink approach to it. It was planning, project development, capital projects. I mean, it was this huge application. It got denied. And so then we started talking, does it make sense to do two approaches, go after planning money and go after capital? And one of the things that the city initially wanted to do was the existing safety action plan identifies, I mentioned this a minute ago, it has some concepts identified in it that people don't know if they can actually be constructed or not. And so they wanted to apply for funding to just get the design done for those projects. And they just learned just in the last couple of days that you can't apply for, you can't apply for design only unless you have the construction funding identified somewhere. And the city doesn't have the projects, the city doesn't currently have funding identified. So that idea has been pulled off the table, and I don't know now what they are, if they're going to be seeking capital funding or not.
I only ask just because if it is the catch-all application like last time, it just seems easier to let them add this portion to their application.
To the city events.
Yeah, for efficiency, because otherwise you're competing for the same.
Yeah, so I think, I'm gonna be meeting with Sarah Hudson and Janet Ruby on either Tuesday or Wednesday next week to regroup and figure out how we want to move forward. But my assumption at this point is we will only be seeking planning funding.
Okay.
And then it'll be a matter of who apply. I mean, does it make sense for us to apply for it, or does the city want to apply for it?
Okay.
I think we will have the contracting mechanism in place to push the planning process out pretty easily if we do it through the MPO, where it might be a little bit more of a hassle for the city to do that.
Yeah, I don't have a preference either way. I know it, I think just in the Tri-County area, we're gonna have about 5 applications for the Safe Streets for All grant. So if we can eliminate one because we're pooling applications, probably better
Yeah,
than
and
a small.
I said I'd mentioned Deschutes County. I don't know if they're applying for capital funding, but I know they're applying for planning funding for sure.
Yeah, they applied for Friary Road last time for capital. I don't know if they were doing it again this time.
So I've exchanged emails with Chris Doughty and Cody Brown asking me what it makes sense for us to do one big planning application or to update the Deschutes County Safety Action Plan and Bend Plan, as one application, but I haven't had a chance to talk to them yet as to whether that makes sense either. But we'll have to pin that down, I think, by the end of next week, just so we have time to get everything in place to get this submitted.
Would a joint application be more attractive than, even if the topic is capital versus planning, but separate entities, is a joint application more attractive?
I don't know if you can actually do a joint application the way the submittal is on that one. And it just looks kind of funny because of the letters of support that you can or can't provide. So if the MPO is applying and then the city of Bend is, but then the city of Bend submits a letter for supporting the MPO, and then ODOT submits a letter supporting the MPO, but then we submit one to support the city, and now you get this complication if you're reviewing and going, well, what's the priority if we fund one or something? So
maybe really clearly delineating a difference between the applications.
Yeah. Or if they are if the city is really just updating the planning side and not having a capital request, then it's probably worth doing it. Or not together, but picking either one or the other to apply based on who can deliver the easiest. But certainly if the city is doing just like if they're picking out an intersection and having a capital improvement request, that could be a standalone versus the planning, because there's 2 separate reviews for planning and for capital improvement dollars.
And I know one thing I was going to add too is the first round of funding awards that came through this program, they awarded over 100 planning grants, I think, around the country. It was a lot. They only awarded 5 capital grants. And so, and seeing the amount of money they're pushing out into the planning arena is what kind of drew us towards trying to seek funding for this to get our safety plan updated, with the idea that we could be seeking capital funding in subsequent rounds of this program.
We actually had a meeting with USDOT last week because we have one for the Warm Springs, or Confederated Tribes of Warm Springs application that we're actually ODOT can't apply for these. It has to be a local jurisdiction entity or a tribe, but the tribe doesn't have resources, so we're writing their application and then they'll have to submit it. But there was some confusion on the wording around tribes and versus cities. And so we actually had a meeting, and the USDOT advised us that there was going to be a lot more scrutiny on the planning, because we were, everybody assumed it was like 99% award for planning dollars last time. And it's like, boy, if anybody can just get one in, then. But they said they're going to change, have a little bit more thorough review this time. I don't know what that means, but.
I spoke to the Bend city manager very briefly, very informally, and asked, simply because the city of Bend has so many more staff and resources, if we, the city, could help the MPO with this grant application, and also keeping in mind that we're down a staff member on the MPO. It was literally at the exact meeting when part of the city manager's report was to thank the MPO for their help with something the city of Bend had just done. And so Eric said, yes, of course, they would be happy to, any kind of help literally filling out the grants. And so I was thinking maybe we just want to amend this, something about coordinating with the city of Bend. One, because we don't want to compete. We want to make sure we just talk out, are we competing with each other? Are we going to do a single grant? And then that coordinating might mean they're actually helping us so that we're only paying the consultant $7,000 instead of 10.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
So, and I'm sure that's probably what you would have done anyway, even if I hadn't said that out loud. Any other questions or thoughts, discussion on this topic?
How much should we worry about having two applicants? If we authorize the MPO and the result is let's have two separate applications from the city, one from the city and one from the MPO. How worried are you, Bob, about undermining this chance of success for either one?
Yeah, I would only be worried if we're both applying for planning dollars, right? Because then so that as long as that's not the case, if the city's just doing capital improvements and you're doing planning, that's two separate. I just didn't, if they were doing that catch-all before that had a little bit of everything, then it would look kind of awkward to have theirs. And then at the same time, we're submitting a grant to change some of the planning language as well.
And we're each recommending the other one.
I do have a question for you, Bob. In the first round of funding, Jefferson County and City of Madras submitted an application to develop a safety action plan, and they got funding. And so they'll have a safety action plan in place, a year and a half from now. So we're going to submit one for Warm Springs. Did Crook County, are they?
They're submitting as well this time. Yeah.
Because I was thinking in terms of the regional safety coordination and messaging. If we have 4 plans, covering all of Central Oregon, that would really be beneficial, I think.
Yeah, no, I think that's why, they're going to compete somewhat if there's limited funds, but, a safety action plan submittal for Warm Springs, Crook County, modifications here, there, that's all supporting the same, because you're turning in census data, you're turning in, some of the data is overlapping, but it shows, it shows an area plan, if you will. So yeah, I think it'll be fine, 2 separate ones, as long as we have that discussion to make sure there's not planning ask in both.
So authorizing staff to pursue this doesn't preclude that kind of coordination. So I'm not comfortable.
Exactly. Now, I was just looking over the suggested motion as well, and it looks plenty broad to include all of the things that we've discussed. And I absolutely believe that Tyler will continue to talk to Bob about, does this seem like a strong application, or are we competing with each other? So thank you so much. Yeah, thanks for all of that input. These things are hard. I think I've said, some days I think we have 100,000 people in Bend, take all the money, Just give us 100,000 people's worth of the money and let us figure out what to do. All of these grant programs and all of these people be just scoring and, oh man, we could put the money into.
But then our
concrete.
subsidy of Greater Idaho would diminish.
Good point. Thank you, Commissioner Chang. Oh, boy. Take it away.
I move to authorize staff to submit a federal safe streets and roads for all grant application to update the Bend Transportation Safety
Sorry.
action plan, excuse me.
Is there a second?
Second.
Oh, thank you, Phil. So we've got a motion from Mr. Mendez and a second from Commissioner Chang. All those in favor, please say aye, raise your hand.
Aye.
That is unanimous as well. Look at us going through here.
Chair, we have a second, there's a second motion. up here
Okay.
For a consultant support, and that is not.
That's the one I
I
was,
added that last month.
Great.
It's not on the agenda.
okay.
I move to authorize staff to seek consulting support in an amount not to exceed $10,000 to help prepare and submit a federal safe streets and roads for all grant application to update the Bend Transportation Safety Action Plan.
Second.
Great, thank you. We've got a motion from Mr. Mendez and a second from Mr. Chang. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye, that is unanimous. Thank you so much. I would just say this looks like exactly in our wheelhouse. We are a transportation planning organization. So I hope that we are successful in getting grants so that we can do the planning that is our purview. All right, that moves us along to item number 8. And this is the Metropolitan Transportation Plan Update Overview and the MT goals and policies. Andrea.
Yeah, you can go ahead and move to the next slide. So there's 2 topics here. I'll be giving a general overview of our next MTP update that we have started into. And then associated with that, looking at the goals and policies of the MTP. So those were approved after our last federal deadline for our MTP update. So we did those in 2020 because there were some portions of that MTP that were unfinished. Our original update was very minimal to meet that federal deadline. And so what we're wanting to know is, does the policy board want to continue with those goals and policies? Would they like to edit some portions of it? The TAC reviewed them at both their April and May meetings and made some suggested edits and recommended approval to the policy board.
Excellent.
Yeah.
All right, sorry.
It's okay. So we are required to maintain a long-range transportation plan so that we can identify how system needs will be met over the 20-year forecast period. And that plan needs to contain projects and policies to serve all modes and work towards our goals. And generally, our MTP is to contain projects of more regional significance. It must be fiscally constrained, and we need to update it every 5 years. So our next update is due in September of 2024. And we are seeking some consultant help with the update. So this is a schedule. Basically, it just shows the different tasks in updating the MTP. I don't expect you to be able to read all that, but
Yes.
and then we have a timeline. It essentially just shows how we're going to get to complete everything by that September 2024 deadline. So the goals and policies. So as I mentioned, they were approved in 2020 after the update of our last MTP. And what we used were the goals and policies that were developed by CTAC, or the Citywide Transportation Advisory Committee, with the joint MTP and cities TSP update. So as the MPO, we took those goals and policies, compared them to federal transportation goals and planning considerations specific to MPOs. They lined up very well. We deleted city-specific policies that don't apply to us. And then we revised some language that would say that we would support activities rather than implement them, since we don't necessarily deliver projects. So next slide. So we have 7 goals, and there's policy language with each one. So I will go through each goal and policy language and get your input on whether you'd like to continue it or make any changes. Yep, so you can go to the next slide. So the first one, increase system capacity, quality, and connectivity for all users. So, yeah.
I'm sorry, just to go back a second.
Sure.
When you said that so these recommended changes align with, which do they align with federal goals
So,
and priorities? And you said they were edited to, in some cases, to remove reference to the city and goals and
Right.
priorities. So why do we need to make sure that they align with federal and not city goals and priorities?
well, because they're essentially the same thing. They're the TSP goals and policies, but edited to remove any city references to actually implementing projects, since we don't implement projects. Is that
Yeah,
is that your question?
kind of. I mean, I'm looking at some of these changes and
Yeah.
thinking about them, and I'm trying to figure out if the changes were recommended for a purpose of reflecting some federal goal
That is necessary, and if that's true, then what is the,
So
What is the
the
rationale?
changes that you're seeing there in red, those were suggested by our technical advisory committee. Just over these last 2 months. And you can scroll to the next, so everyone
for
can see
the
what I'm
purpose
talking
of
about.
being consistent with federal goals, or?
No, so
No.
their proposed changes were for specific issues, like for example, when it says to add in that language, arterial and collector, there was some concern with city staff about cut-through traffic on local streets with that particular policy language. So the TAC had agreed, including city staff, that specifying arterial collectors would take away that element of local streets, which as an MPO, we focus on the higher order streets rather than local streets.
That makes sense.
So what you're looking at, what you see in red are edits suggested by our TAC and not necessarily to federal requirements.
Okay.
Okay.
I feel like we have supported improvements on local streets, specifically safe routes to school.
Yeah, so I mean, the side to that would be more significant projects, like for example, key routes. They use a lot of local streets.
Yes,
And we
right.
do provide funding for that.
Okay,
So that would still be something that we would support and fund, but generally speaking, an MPO would be looking at, arterials and collectors and not necessarily local streets, except in those situations where a local street is part of a bigger.
I get it. Yeah, okay. And it says for all arterials, I'm not going to try and say that. It says for all instead of for only arterial. So it's not preventing us
No,
from, like I said, safe routes to school that's on local streets.
No.
Right, okay.
yeah, so the first policy there, increase route choice. Route choices and connections for all arterial and collector users. The second one, use technology to enhance system performance, including accessible technology. Increase the number of people who walk, ride a bike, and/or take transit. Provide reliable travel times for commuters, emergency vehicles, and commercial users. Minimize congestion. reduce vehicle operating and maintenance costs due to poor pavement conditions, emphasize asset management. And again, the policy is that the MPO will support these activities.
The only word that stands out to me up there is provide. All of the others are increase, enhance, increase, minimize, reduce, emphasize. Providing reliable travel times is a much bigger thing than working toward travel times, increasing reliability of travel times. But, you know, I don't know that it's necessarily worth changing.
So, yeah, so it would be the MPO will support activities that provide reliable travel times for commuters.
Yeah. I mean, good luck. We still have trains. It's like, you know, we can do all the supporting we want. And there will still be times when people just don't know how long it's going to take them to get somewhere. It is my only comment. I don't think it needs to change. Thank you, Esri.
Any other questions or comments on goal 1 and policy language?
I think I have a comment, but it's more related to the goals in general, so I'll wait until the end.
Okay. Next goal is around safety. So ensure safety for all users. The MPO will support activities that reduce serious injuries and fatalities, maximize safe routes for vulnerable users within and between neighborhoods and throughout the community for all users. Design and build facilities and routes that maximize safety for motorists and vulnerable road users. And lastly, the MPO will support activities that ensure safe speeds.
I think so. I was going to save it to the end, but I feel like it's probably more appropriate to share it in the context of a goal like the second goal here. My concern is that we've essentially had decades of very auto-centric planning, and that I take our duty now to try to shift that, because it's not a sustainable path forward. And I worry that a lot of the language in these goals is around meeting there's a tension. I mean, it's sort of mixed. There's many bullet points that talk about meeting the needs of all users. And my experience is, in a given context, we really can't meet the needs of all users. You know, we can't have a high volume of fast moving cars and also have a safe, comfortable place for people to walk, roll, and bike. And so my take is we need to identify a priority, a hierarchy, to say, actually, we need to be kind of undoing the last several decades of planning that has gotten almost every United States city to where it is, and essentially adopt more of a European style approach that is really going to be effective at giving people safer options. So when we look at something like arterial and collector, or looking at, swapping out pedestrians and bicyclists and including motorists and vulnerable road users, I worry that we're not really looking at the alarming increase in pedestrian deaths that have occurred over the last decade. We don't have that for motor vehicle users. So I feel like by focusing so much on all users, we're really doing an inequitable disservice to the people that really need the most attention. However, I do also see, this is where it's sort of mixed, because there are goals of increasing the number of people who walk, bike, ride, or take transit, increasing the safety of specific users. I just worry that it's feels like we're shifting the balance back towards motorists, focusing on things like arterial and collectors. We don't have arterials and collectors for people walking, biking, and rolling, and it's not comfortable to do that on those streets. So this organization ends up increasing route choices and connections for arterial and collector users. I worry that we're really missing out on the users of the system most. So that's kind of I see the general theme here, and it is mixed, because there's some tensions in here, and I would love to say, so if it were up to me, I would say, I don't feel like we need to do anything to focus more on motorists. I think that's at the bottom of the hierarchy. And that's where a lot of these changes seem to be shifting it back towards, towards kind of the planning that I think has gotten us to the predicament that we're in. So I don't know, I feel like there's some tensions here, and I'm not sure that someone reading this would recognize that it really should be in my view, a hierarchy rather than a, all road users matter when we really need to be paying attention to some road users more than others.
So would you say something like prioritizing vulnerable users?
Yeah. Yeah.
Great.
Trying to kind of integrate that theme throughout. But, yeah, we could go back, we could go through every bullet and sort of.
Yeah,
Try to evaluate
there's a
what-
lot, I don't want us to get it devolve into wordsmithing here.
Yeah.
And so maybe, this is also something to keep in mind as we move forward. If there are opportunities to make changes, yeah, I would definitely support them.
But you've emphasized a principle and a theme, and I would support one trying to make sure that that principle and theme is addressed throughout this, throughout these goals.
Well, as staff, I could take, we can take that back and make some edits to kind of make that point more clear in here and bring it back to you.
Or just make sure, if it may be fairly clear, there's things like increase the number of people who walk, ride, bike, and take transit.
Right.
In here already. It may already be here, but just to kind of like double check. Review with that,
yeah.
with that principle in mind one more time.
The kind of parallel that I think of it is in terms of when somebody says Black Lives Matter, it's not saying that some other lives don't matter. It's identifying there's huge disparities here, and we need to pay attention to some people's experiences because they're not really being paid attention to in the process. So I think, that's what I worry about. So I'm not saying that like the lives of motorists don't matter. I think they do. I just think that I worry about ignoring the increase in pedestrian fatalities or the shift that I think that we really need to give people more safe options. That is apparent here in some bullet points, but not necessarily others.
Okay. I think those are specifically like with goals 1 and 2.
Yeah.
Primarily.
Yeah.
I completely understand what you're saying, Ariel. That's kind of why the arterial and collector in that first goal caught my attention, right? And I called that out. And yeah, that second goal is specifically saying motorists, but I don't see it overall in the rest of the goals. I think the goals do a good job of focusing on safety and on all users. Maybe I'll speak up for the ghost of MPO board members past, but there was one year when someone suggested that the goal, we should use our goals to limit our work to, what was it, Bob? It was only streets or roads that served the entire MPO area, right? And trying to focus on highways, right? And I pointed out that even Highway 20 doesn't do that because Highway 20 doesn't serve Deschutes River Woods, and Highway 97 doesn't do that because it doesn't serve Tumalo. But nonetheless, that there was a legitimacy to that position because the whole point of the MPO is connecting communities. And so MPOs generally do work with larger pieces of infrastructure. MPOs usually are, I think, focused on highways that are connecting those communities. We're unusual, we're a single city MPO. And so the kind of prime directive of the MPOs isn't there for us. You know, we're not with ourselves and Redmond. And so with that in mind, you know, we do have maybe more ability to focus on the city of Bend because we are a single city MPO. But I think we also need to remember the purpose of MPOs in general, if that makes sense, Ariel, and not be too in the weeds in just something that's just city of Bend. Does that
No,
make
I think
sense?
that's fair, but
Yeah,
like, for
okay.
example, for goal 2, we
Uh-huh.
design and build facilities and routes that maximize safety for motorists and vulnerable groups.
I'm with you. I don't know why motorists got thrown in there. Let's just pull that out. I mean, why isn't it just for all users?
I
Right?
mean, I would worry that, yeah,
That
it's,
maximize safety for all users,
it
and
overlooks. the
particularly
potential.
vulnerable users.
You know, we do mention transit in goal 1. But when I think about the future of, say, connecting Redmond or Lapine or
Mhm.
Pineville or Sisters or Tumalo to Bend,
Mhm.
which I recognize are, for the most part, not within the MPO's boundaries, but looking ahead, like, I don't want to rely on everybody driving back and forth.
Of course.
And so when we look at, are we really going to say we're calling out motorists? That seems like a short-sighted choice.
That's fine with me. All right. You want to pull motorists back out there? That is again, that's a recommendation that we got from our technical advisory committee. We can take that recommendation, we can change it, we can change any of these. And absolutely, if you would like to, you know, specify the change to that one, it would be fine with me.
I don't have a problem shifting it a little bit, you know, from the history of these and, you know, they're 5-year plans. We have quite a bit of turnover, right? They need to be broad enough that we
That's right.
don't feel limited when we're making choices. But as we know, just the last few months when we've made choices on funding, we're not going back here and saying it doesn't say that we can do this or it does, right? So they haven't been, you know, bookends to our decision making. And I do like the idea of prioritizing things. I do think though, when you take into the concept that, you know, you're reading the bullets as the MPO will support activities that maximize safety for all users. I mean, that's not letting us make a choice. It's actually saying we care about all users. So I think we just have to be careful in when and where we add that. I certainly understand the sentiment about prioritizing mode shift over other things. That's important to me. When it comes to safety though, I think we always need to make sure we say safety for all users, right? But if we want to get into the details on, I mean, this safety one, I have a hard time saying we should remove one or the other. If we want to include it and not even in a hierarchy, but, you know, highlight vulnerable users, then certainly I'm okay for it. But in the other ones where it's not safety related and we want to have language about prioritizing mode shifts over motor vehicle improvements, then, you know, certainly I'm okay with that and understand the sentiment there.
So how about safety for all users? There, that third bullet for goal 2.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of a funny bullet because I think you could probably just say maximize safety, but then it sort of seems redundant with the first bullet. Yeah, and I mean, this is hard because I didn't want to get too far into wordsmithing and didn't have specific changes that would apply it to you know, each bullet here. But so Bob, if I understand your concern, you're worried about being too restrictive and finding the MPO's activities down.
Yeah, I mean, that's the only thing is it does, you know, it certainly sets a tone for us. So I appreciate that, you know, we want to make it our own. But it's pretty broad now too, right? That it's not limiting us. My only thing is on the safety one, I hate to take names out of safety, right? If you want to, like, we'll prioritize capital improvements in these areas, certainly put them in the order we want to, but on the safety one. But just on that same topic, is vulnerable user is that our new definition or?
That was added by the TAC to be specific to cyclists and pedestrians.
Yeah.
Or,
I just,
And-
is the
motorcycles.
vulnerable users the catchphrase for bike and ped now, or, I mean, I know we use it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It just seems like
It's
a
a
point in
common-
time one versus.
It is. I
Okay.
had a little bit of the same concern as you
Okay.
in terms of,
What does that mean? Who's
Yeah, I mean,
vulnerable user?
yeah. I mean, it's fine for this point in time, but then in.
Seen as a term to cover
Yeah, just,
anyone traveling
yeah,
outside.
vulnerable user, parentheses, bike and ped, type of.
We're really getting into wordsmithing, but, the overarching heading for this goal is ensure safety for all users.
Yes.
So we can riff off of that in the bullets to call out specific
Good point.
users while ensuring that,
All
the,
users.
the overall intent, the whole package of bullets is about all users. I mean, so.
Good point.
Yeah, no, I feel like we could almost even just remove that third bullet entirely, because I'm not sure that it adds anything that the first and second bullet don't already include.
Design and build, I think maybe is the only thing that's in there that's not in anything else.
That's true. I mean, I guess.
No, it's a good question. Yeah, no.
Maximizing safe routes, are we maximizing safe routes in any other way other than designing a road?
Right, yeah.
I mean, I know I'm being, it's a serious.
I mean, yes, yeah,
Honestly.
we educate people as well,
That's,
I would say,
that's true.
that there's one other component. Yep.
The vulnerable word just hits me because, we're in this equity world and underserved are, right? And so I kind of, when I see that, I think it means underserved and not just from a bike and ped, but from a, socioeconomic, race, whatever the case may be. I don't know. I'm okay with the word. It just, it just seems awkward in this context around what we're defining.
well, 'cause I know through the safety action planning process, older drivers fit into that vulnerable
Yeah.
user category too, because if somebody who's 25 is in a crash versus somebody who's 75 almost always suffers more severe consequences because of age-related issues, and so it's a great point.
I mean, I think the term vulnerable road user it's challenging, because when I am not driving, I don't consider myself a vulnerable road user. I'm a perfectly normal road user. I'm at higher risk because of the choices of others to drive. That is the choice that makes me higher risk. But so, yeah, so it's a little bit pejorative in some ways, but that's a whole other debate. I think it's fine. I mean, I would suggest maybe routes, design and build facilities and routes that maximize safety for all, and in particular, vulnerable road users, to get at the idea that there is some inequities. But again, I'm not saying that I want to ignore the needs of, I don't want us to say we're not going to do anything for people who drive. That's not what I'm saying. I just want to recognize that. I think it's important to have a kind of hierarchy and to recognize that. So I feel like I don't have a solid proposal here. And if we have the opportunity down the road, I think to revisit this idea of expressing a hierarchy, which I think is here, it's just sort of feels ham-fisted and not uniformly presented. And I don't want to have a wordsmithing effort now that.
But we could just say, how about this bullet says, maximize safety for all road users with an emphasis on pedestrians, cyclists, and other vulnerable populations.
I think that sounds good.
That as the goal or as a policy language?
As the bullet.
As the policy
The
language.
third,
Yeah.
the third one?
Mhm.
Maximize safety for,
Well, that maximize is the second one.
well, I mean, I'm picking up in the middle of the bullet.
Yeah.
Design and build facilities and
Oh,
routes.
I see what you're saying,
Maximize
sorry about
safety
that.
For all road users with an emphasis on pedestrians, cyclists, and other vulnerable users. I feel vulnerable when I'm on my bike.
I appreciate Bob's comment about the equity issue because I haven't seen the detailed bicycle and pedestrian, like the actual minutia of the crash reports for a while, but I know if you look back at some of the folks who've been killed biking, they have been quite a few, homeless people and then extremely low income people.
Yeah, the national average is extremely, or
These people at the bottom third,
Yeah.
of the income spectrum, that's the thing who are.
I like actually using, like you said, Commissioner Chang, about peds, bicycles, and then vulnerable, because I think it opens up this, it could be an equity, it could be any broad range of.
Well, I would say a 16-year-old is a vulnerable, honestly. I think you're kind of right. It's the ends of the spectrum. It's those young kids who don't have experience. They're more vulnerable simply because of that. And then as we get older, we're just more likely to be injured when kids bounce.
I think that sounds great.
Okay, thank you, Ari. Those are all excellent points,
So
everybody.
I'll
Thank
make
you.
that, I'll make that change to the third one. Charlie, can we go back to the first one, or goal one, because I'm wondering if in there, we might be able to make any changes at this time so we could have it.
I feel like if we're going to be a little bit critical on words, then I would go back. I honestly don't understand why arterial and collector is here, because we're going to be broad. I mean, we may have.
That seemed like a weird one to me too, Bob.
And if we're making edits,
So the TAC member rationale for suggesting that is that the language saying increased route choices and connections for, it was all, or how it is approved currently is for all users. But they wanted to add in arterial and collector users because they felt that policy language would encourage neighborhood cut-through traffic, potentially.
Discourage.
But if we didn't add arterial and
Yeah.
I see.
And but by adding in arterial and collectors, just like make that specific, would then discourage neighborhood cut-through traffic, was the rationale there.
I see.
but we do want to increase route choices and connections.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah,
So
I
again,
think,
these are
take it out.
recommendations.
Sorry.
yeah, take it out.
Okay.
This is a lengthy.
Yes, this is what.
I know, we'll take it out. Oh, heavens.
Well, then Andrea coordinated a meeting with these 2 or 3 people, I think.
Well, it was the county staff and city staff that were butting heads about this.
ODOT might have been a little bit too.
I'm going to speak up then if it was some ODA. But I mean, these type of things are limiting language to me, right?
Yeah,
Put that in there.
Yeah.
And not that would be the reason we don't do something. It just seems like why,
It's more restrictive than maybe necessary.
When we're getting there's more flexibility happening now from the federal level in terms of like the discretionary money that the board allocates as TBG funding. Historically, you couldn't use that on anything that was classified below a major collector roadway. So it had to be that or higher. Well, now you can utilize up to 15% on local streets.
But when you just read, we'll support activities, it should say we'll support anything that increases route choices across all.
yeah, I don't
So I think we're
see,
just getting more flexibility.
how that
to we spend money,
language
whether
is-
it's a local street or.
how is that
state
language
highway.
increasing cut-through that's
Send me
just
the
that.
name of that ODOT employee.
Yeah, exactly, Bob.
So with that change,
That ODOT employee may or may not be retired.
Are they in this room? This building right now? They're not in the room. Okay,
So
number 3.
with
No,
with that change, we're good on goal one and the,
Yes, thank you.
all right, so let's go to number 3.
We are.
Doing everything that the tax said.
I know. I'm sorry, Greg.
Well, we kept vulnerable in there.
Yes. thoughts.
All right, so
Okay.
goal 3, facilitate housing supply, job creation, and economic development to meet demand growth. The MPO will support activities that build new roads and upgrade existing roads to serve areas targeted for growth and job creation, specifically prioritized opportunity and expansion areas. The MPO will support activities that provide access and connectivity to expanded housing supply, improve connectivity and route choices for commercial users. Any comments or concerns with the language in goal 3? No?
I like this one. I'm glad it's in here. I, over the years, have very much learned about the connection between infrastructure and housing, infrastructure and jobs. And yeah, we absolutely sometimes have the opportunity to support those other non-transportation goals, economy and housing. And so I think this is entirely appropriate.
Okay, we can move on to, oh, sorry.
Is there infrastructure? I mean, should we be mentioning infrastructure in addition to transportation infrastructure?
Oh,
Pathways.
And that just crossed my mind too. It's like, we want to be supporting.
yeah, you're right.
Shouldn't
just be roads, yeah.
I mean, we do, because we have supported urban trails and, as long as they, right,
But is there a reason not to mention things beyond roads?
Yeah, no, I think you're right.
You know,
yeah,
not to-
certainly. that could be-
And, kind of,
Yeah.
Ariel's principle, we're not saying not roads, but
Right.
roads and other
And it
transportation.
could be
But
transportation
for
facilities.
yeah.
Yeah, would you do that? Could we have transportation
Instead of,
facilities?
so replace roads with,
Yeah, build transportation facilities and upgrade existing
Transportation facilities.
facilities. Build new and upgrade existing transportation facilities. Perfect. Good point. Anything else on goal number 3? All right, on to number 4. That's right, that's
okay.
the most
number-
ready.
Yes, another one that took time. So goal 4, protect livability and ensure equity and access. The MPO will support activities that incorporate a complete streets approach for all new road projects and road reconstruction. The MPO will support activities that increase safe routes to school, programs and infrastructure for kids walking and rolling to school. Ensure that all equity-related populations, as identified in the Bend MPO Equity Mapping Tool and Bend MPO Title VI Plan, have access to transportation options. Ensure opportunities to participate in public planning processes are available regardless of income, disability, age, race, color, national origin, gender identity, sexual orientation, or technology. Encourage the use of roads for their stated classification. Encourage through freight traffic on ODOT facilities.
So my only comment on this, and I'd be curious to hear your thoughts, is when we talk about incorporating a complete streets approach for all new road projects, I feel like complete streets was a really big buzzword 10 years ago that made it into policies 5 years ago. And I think now people are maybe starting to change their minds a little bit. For example, if we were talking about, everybody loves to use the Parkway as the example, Parkway with the painted bike lanes on it and the at-grade crosswalks. That in some ways, that's a complete streets approach because we have facilities for a variety of different users on it. But really what we probably need is separation of facilities, and in totality, we need to make sure that we're meeting the needs of all users, not necessarily on every single project. So when we try to mix all of these together, you don't really get good results. And so I feel like I've had doubts about the complete streets approach in the context of some projects. I would rather say, this is a route that is really going to prioritize people walking, biking, and rolling. This is where we're going to have the drivers going fast with lots of volume. Let's make sure that in totality, we're meeting the needs of both of these different user groups. Not necessarily that every new road project needs to be a complete streets approach, because then what we end up with is painted lanes on the parkway, or example that I'm familiar with in town, now we're doing buffered bike lanes, but on a 35-mile-an-hour speed limit street with drivers often doing 40 miles an hour, that's not great. But that is still the complete streets approach. So I feel like I have a lot of
It's kind of
hesitancy.
ignoring the level of stress.
Yeah,
it is.
process, yeah.
I can
Like
tell
trying
you,
to meet, saying we're gonna meet complete streets approach for all new road projects seems problematic.
Because what we're really trying to do is end up with a complete system.
Exactly.
Yeah,
I don't think in this one, because we are already talking about like bullet one doesn't really mean anything under the livability and equity for me. I mean, to your point, it's a system approach. We already have on other goals a system approach. So does it really need to focus here? This should be more around the other bullets around the underserved communities that we're talking about. But, I agree. We either rewrite bullet one to say something around the system, or is it really needed since we're already.
just take it out.
I mean, yeah, I guess I worry about it. If we take it out, are we doing a disservice in some way?
Oh, well,
Yeah,
yeah, and the goal is access as well as livability and equity. So
Yeah,
that
it's just we have
access.
goals under the first two, right, that address the whole system. I mean, not that we can't word something here, but
Uh-huh.
Right.
it definitely complete streets is not a common nomenclature anymore, and nor is it relevant on all roads within the MPO. It's got to be a systemic approach.
I mean, what if it was something like ensure that the needs of all users are accounted for in all new road projects, so that, I mean, obviously there's going to be some judgments, but if you build something like the Parkway, we're not saying we're expecting people to cross at grade. We're going to look for opportunities for undercrossings or bridges to make sure that their needs are met.
No, I think that was a good, ensure all users are accounted for in all new road projects and road reconstruction. Yeah. I think that's good. I understand your point entirely. Yeah. All right, next bullet, safe routes to school. That one just kind of seems to me to define what safe routes to schools is, but it's okay with me to put it in there. And then ensure that all equity-related populations. So, again, is that the language? Is that, that
So
sounds
the-
kind of weird
the
to me.
ra- Yeah, so the rationale there was instead of specifically stating all of the various populations that are included within the equity mapping tool and the Title VI plan.
Mhm.
And you can see that note on the side explains what populations specifically we're talking about.
So this,
Oh, sorry, it's not on there. I apologize. It isn't in your agenda packet. It's on the slide.
this little note,
Yeah, the
equity
little note
mapping
on
tool.
the side.
Okay.
The various populations.
So I guess I don't know why we need equity-related populations in that sentence. Ensure that all populations identified in, right?
Mhm.
Okay. And then that one's all right. I think that one's all right.
Yeah, or just ensure that population's identified.
Exactly. That's exactly what I just said, right?
Right.
Get rid of that confusing equity-related populations, right? Great. Okay. Next bullet, ensure opportunities to participate. Yes. Are we missing anybody in there?
Similar to the comments about bike ped and vulnerable users, and I'm okay with the language, but I actually feel like this is the one where we should say prioritizing improvements in areas that serve these populations versus just saying we'll have access, like the example is transit facilities to Deschutes River Woods that don't exist or things like that. And I'm fine with the language, don't get me wrong, but I think that's where some of these discussions over the last few years for ODOT certainly have changed. We've always been equitable. We just don't make projects to prioritize equity, right? I mean, a project is equitable. When we have a project, it's not disadvantaged to one person or the other, but we weren't picking projects based on an equity.
Right.
Now we are.
Right.
So you could add, wow, it's quite a long sentence, but I mean, you could say something like encourage engagement, somewhere in there.
So Bob, are you thinking something along the lines of, if we look at the equity mapping tool in the Title VI plan, does that identify a prioritization of?
Yeah, I mean, it's just like on the it's red on the equity mapping, right? The Deschutes River Woods for several reasons, socioeconomic, age, and things like that too. And so it just seems like we probably should prioritize projects in that area if we're really being equitable versus, hey, we have a bike ped project up north here and it's very equitable because it's for all users and so it's connecting, but that's not the reason we picked it type of thing. And I mean, I can go without, this is just, obviously this language gives us the room for that discussion when a certain project comes up or things like that. It just similar to your comments around the bike ped priority, right? This is the one that hits us right now.
The way that I think of your comment is when we talk about equity mapping, we're talking about using equity in a planning tool. Here, we're not talking about planning, we're talking about the process and participation in the process, but we don't really have a way to implement the concept. The similar, what equity mapping did for planning, we need something like that for accessing the planning process.
Yeah, or project selection, because the example right now is, so we had this criteria this last time we selected, we're always like 5 years ahead. We're picking projects for 27 to 30 now, and we're trying to use this equity lens. And how we pick the 24, 27 projects is just, here's the projects you are, how do you make them equitable? And so you're like, okay, well, that's reasonable. To now we're going, you have a $10 million bucket, we want an equity project, right? Well, that's a lot different because then you're going to pick an area that's underserved or you're going to pick a project that serves, you're not going to just make a project equitable. And so that's how I kind of read these as, hey, everything should be equitable. Yeah, great, that's true, but it's not prioritizing projects based on equity.
How about that third bullet? Ensure that populations identified in the Bend MPO equity mapping tool and plan are prioritized to have access to transportation options.
I thought you were going to say just have access to transportation options and then add on the
Prioritize investment.
prioritizing in access, participation in planning. And that way it's the same populations with the concept of a hierarchy or prioritization rather, and applying it to the planning process.
Yeah, I mean, I think that gives us, again, as long as it has some reference to it, we can be citing it as as we're making decisions a year from now.
Time check, we're at almost 20 after. How are we feeling about goal 4?
So, could you repeat that, what you were thinking for the third?
Sorry.
I think, so ensure that, so the third bullet would read, I think as Councilor Campbell suggested, ensure that populations identified in the Bend MPO equity mapping tool and Title VI plan have access to transportation options and opportunities to participate in public planning processes. That would be focusing the opportunities to participate in public planning processes on the populations identified in the Title VI plan
Oh, sure.
and MPO equity mapping.
And then as far with that, then remove the fourth one or keep the fourth?
So we're combining 3 and 4?
Well, I think taking the idea of 4,
Mhm.
but making the MPO equity mapping tool and Title VI plan do the work of it.
Mhm.
Mhm.
Instead of this list of
Right.
disability, age, race, color, it's identified in the equity map, yeah.
Yeah, I think so. I look
Bob
at
was-
bullet
well-
points a little different in the fact.
Well,
that
so there are some, covered in the Title VI plan and equity mapping tool, what isn't in there are the last 3 on that 4th one, gender identity, sexual orientation, or technology.
Okay,
Yeah, it's more broad.
Well, and
Okay.
bullet 4 kind of looks at, we have a new public meeting procedure where we can pay people to attend. And so I kind of look at that as this is a way to ensure we're getting, a variety of people at meetings, and they're not limited, to some of the restrictions that we've had in the past.
Okay,
And
Andrea's
Yeah.
point sounds to me like also maybe we want to look at the Title VI plan then to update that to include those values, those characteristics.
well, so the Title VI plan actually already has sections on it on how we need to use processes to reach out to different groups.
But doesn't include
But it doesn't include,
gender identity, sexual orientation.
No. Simply because that's not
Those are-
identified in the law, that the Title VI of the Civil Rights Act.
And those populations are, all the rest of these populations, we at least have some mapping related. data,
Yeah.
Whereas those ones we don't.
all right.
I mean, I think I heard in what Bob was saying that, ensuring opportunities to participate are available is passive. It's sort of like a passive kind of, and we want to, be encouraging or making it easy, making it easier, taking, reducing barriers, not just, hey, there's these opportunities, everybody's welcome.
Yeah,
So I.
good.
You don't
Ensure
have to-
opportunities
I don't
and,
need to wordsmith this, but if that kind of concept of, actively encouraging or facilitating for people, not just, this opportunity is available for everybody.
yeah, good. Ensure opportunities and encourage participation. Maybe.
Right, but then you can't say regardless of, because that makes it sound like we're requiring the process to ignore all of these attributes.
Right? That's a double negative. So
Right.
you could take away the regardless
actually
of, and
want
you would
to-
say,
Make sure that they are regarded.
emphasis on populations that have historically been,
Right, I see.
lack of a better word, disenfranchised because of this.
Right.
Okay,
Just one of the, I thought, Bob, I'm wondering on the, 3rd bullet, I don't think it's separate or not, but you'd kind of hinted out prioritizing investments in those, those areas.
Yeah, as I say, certainly that's what I think. That's a tough for the MPO as a whole, right? As long as it's a discussion item, and I think the language we're adding reflects that. I certainly think it should be, but that's probably within the bookends that we're creating here with guidance and goals, and that's okay.
So I would suggest, instead of just saying are available regardless of, I would say are available with respect to income, disability, age. And that, I think, would allow the organization to recognize any of these attribute as important enough to say maybe some outreach needs to happen to make sure that we're being inclusive.
Yeah, the example for us on, one of our plans down south here on the south end of town is, we put out flyers. We're looking at applications for wide variety versus paying a homeless person to attend and getting them transportation to a meeting every time, right? Where we're going out of our way to do it. And I think that's how I read bullet 4 is we want to go out of our way to ensure that we're including everyone, or forced inclusion almost, just to make sure we have it versus just, we're trying to be diverse in our selection.
Right.
So keep number 4.
Yeah, I think with the change that.
So instead of saying regardless of, with respect to, and actually, I mean, you raise a good point. I'm not sure that housing status, or if you wanted to say socioeconomic status, is kind of a broader term that actually encompasses, I think, several of these, but.
With
Okay.
respect to.
I mean, income is a pretty good proxy.
Yeah, the list.
Yes, okay, that makes sense.
And the next one is the no cut through traffic bullet, right? Encourage the use of roads for their stated classification. Encourage through freight traffic on ODOT facilities. That one's a little interesting to me. We don't want freight traffic stopping for a cup of coffee or lunch.
Yeah, I don't know.
That's an old.
I don't get
That's
that.
an old policy, and I think
I mean, maybe it's related to the one just before it, like we don't want freight traffic using
it's.
Exactly.
It's through freight traffic, and so it's not stuff that's not stopping there.
Yeah.
So, I mean, and what they don't want, I think because this is an old policy from many, many years ago, and I think the concern at that time was, this was before Empire Avenue extension was constructed.
Mhm.
There was a huge amount of concern that Empire might become a de facto truck route, for trucks that are making that kind of movement from,
From birds.
Yeah.
Yeah.
or vice versa. And so I think was kind of the genesis of that, but that's an old policy. And
We see this language quite a bit on 97 corridor stuff because we certainly, we want Bend to be livable, bikeable, everything. We need to get freight up and down to, Chilliwack and underserved community and things. So we're always worried about that disconnect. I mean, this language doesn't mean anything to me, how it's written.
Right, the wording of it.
But certainly that's why we have bullets like this, is just to, hey, we still need to prioritize, Bend doesn't have a port, the rail facilities are lacking. We still need to get highway freight traffic up and down the region.
Uh-huh.
And you aren't, can I say something?
Sure.
That one, from my standpoint, I'm looking at from Baker, there's a lot of freight traffic on Baker, 27, to get on 20, you got 20 and 26.
Yes.
You got also. So I'm wondering if that's included here.
Encourage through freight traffic to use ODOT facilities,
So to rely on ODOT.
to rely on ODOT facilities. How about that? Right, that's really what we're talking about there, is we're trying to keep the ODOT facilities where they allow that through movement. And it's kind of like the cut through traffic. And then the flip is keep them off of local streets, right? And the way we keep them off of local streets is providing that infrastructure that they need to get through town, right? Okay, good. Number 5, steward and environment.
So the MPO will support activities that minimize the impacts of the transportation system on natural features, minimize the impacts of the system on air and water quality and noise, reduce carbon emissions from transportation.
Yep.
I do want to leave on Friday afternoon. I'm sorry for doing this, but we have support climate resiliency bullets. I just wonder at point in time now it's, climate resiliency has a broad definition that we all use to add a bullet that
Support
references it.
climate resiliency.
Yeah, or I mean, I think the city actually has a goal around supporting. I don't think it's climate resiliency, but you have in your city council planning, right? Don't you have a climate goal?
Sure. Yeah.
I can't remember how ours is worded, but I was just thinking a fourth bullet that I know carbon emissions is somewhat related, but.
Yeah. Okay.
Do
Good.
you want to make that part of the heading for this goal? Steward the environment and support climate resiliency.
Yeah, maybe that's.
How about that?
Yeah.
Okay.
Great. Great. Thanks, you guys. All right. Number 6, regional outlook and future focus. I like that.
MPO will support activities that coordinate and partner with other public and private capital improvement projects and local regional planning initiatives. The MPO will support activities that create a system that is designed to implement innovative and emerging transportation technologies.
You know what I might want to add in there is what I thought of with future focus was generational equity, is thinking about future generations, not just the future of technology and the future of pavement and whatever it may be. Anybody okay with that? Okay, number 7.
So we're adding a bullet saying to encourage generational equity.
Yeah, please.
Yep.
Okay.
Clarify.
Number 7, implement comprehensive funding and implementation plan.
And this is stating the MPO will, not the MPO will support any longer. So the MPO will coordinate in identifying stable, equitable, adequate, and achievable funding for transportation programs and projects. The MPO will ensure that the MTP financial plan and investment priorities are transparent, understandable, and broadly supported by the community. The MPO will maximize the ability to leverage alternative and multiple funding sources for transportation system improvements that deliver benefits to all users and geographies equitably and in a timely manner. The MPO will include performance measures, benchmarks, and a formal process to periodically assess progress to date and adjust or update the plan as needed.
All right.
Sounds good.
Any last questions for Andrea? I'm going to pronounce your name every possible way today, Andrea. Andrea.
Andrea.
Andrea.
Make sure I get it right too.
I know, I'm sorry. All right, I would look for a motion.
I move to approve the MTP goals and policies as amended.
Second.
Great, we have a motion from Councillor Mendez and a second from Commissioner Chang. All those in favor? Aye. Great, that's unanimous. Thanks, everybody. Excellent comments, excellent discussion. Okay, other business.
That's the biggest one.
This is the biggest one. We need to thank Cameron is retiring at the end of June. Oh my gosh, Cameron, you've been taking our minutes since 2006?
Yes.
Wow.
I don't think I started in January that year, but I think I started with you when you were a steering committee before the policy board was formed.
Holy hairdo, Cameron. We appreciate you so much.
I'm going to miss this. I'm going to miss you guys. It's been a part of my life to write for government and business for over 30 years. And I'm really looking forward to just attending a meeting and enjoying it instead of working.
Oh, nice.
Is there really enjoying?
I know, enjoying.
Well, let me put it this way. As a writer for the MPO, I'm constrained from participating in discussions to clarify points that I think need a little extra touch. So I think as a citizen, I would have a bit more opportunity to say something.
Oh, well,
Let
that
her
would be
rip.
great. We'll put you on the technical advisory committee there, Cameron.
Technical, huh?
Well, I just appreciate you so much. I absolutely understand that if you're not here, we can't have a meeting at all. You are the one person we absolutely need.
And I appreciate your good thoughts about that, but I want you to be responsible the way you've been doing when you restate a, who voted or who
Oh, thank you.
seconded. It's not for me per se, it's for the public that is not familiar with all these processes and
Sure.
don't have time to wade through, John said this and then Ed said that. No, John contradicted Ed, and it goes back and forth. And at the end, I don't know what you said.
Sure.
The public. And you're
Yeah.
saying you want to be transparent to the public about the decisions and how you reach them. And that's part of that.
You're absolutely right, Cameron. That's a great point. Well, thank you so much for all of your work, Cameron. You really are the definite public servant. You really have served your community, and we appreciate that, of
Thank you.
course. Let's see, Dutch Cycling Embassy?
Oh, I was gonna say, and then the other thing I added on there is a support letter for CET. They are gonna be submitting a grant application to develop a long-range capital needs plan. It's something new. I think they typically operate like kind of a 5-year capital planning cycle. And they want to really look out long-term and see what they need. Because not only on the ground, but just the bus technology, the types of buses they're using and stuff are changing quite a bit. So they're wanting a support letter from the MPO. So if we could just get
Sounds good?
nod aheads or
Not ahead? Yes, all right, that looks good.
what's that?
Do you know the grant that,
They're applying for a TGM grant.
oh, it is, okay.
Dutch Cycling?
Dutch Cycling, thing I was gonna update you there was the board last month approved funding for that.
Yes, we did.
And one of the things we had said we would do is look at grant opportunities to reduce the,
MPO.
we had offset our funding a little bit. So Andrea and Robin Lewis from the city of Bend have been looking into those, and I think they found 2 that were potentials. One of those is, I think, probably not a very good option. So I don't know if that's gonna be submitted or not, but the other one is that TGM has a small pot of funding that can help cover costs like this. And
Yeah, it
so-
sounds like a maximum of $5,000. So, yeah, I worked with TGM staff and it sounds, she thought that it would be a good project, very applicable to that funding source. So I packaged up a package for Robin to submit once a couple of the more details are fleshed out with them. Oh, well, you had asked us to look into other.
We actually found it.
Oh, I looked at the TGM.
Well,
Good
thank
job.
you.
Good job.
I think the only question we have about that one is the potential timeline for the funding, that we may not actually get the funding until after the workshop happens, which could be, there could be some complications around that, so we've got to get that figured out pretty quickly.
Okay. Summer of Safety. I was at the Central Oregon Area Commission for Transportation Safety Committee meeting. COACs are nested under COIC, and our act received a grant for transportation safety. The money has got to be spent by the end of the federal fiscal year, which is September. Lieutenant Chambers from the Redmond Police Department spoke up. There were ideas for using the money for maybe consultants and research, and we could learn more about DUIs that are happening. And Lieutenant Chambers spoke up and said, there's been a lot of research. We know an awful lot about this. How about we just use the money to support things that we know are at least somewhat effective? That really spoke to my heart. I have been running with that idea for more than a week. And I came up with this idea of, well, how about if we just say it's going to be the Summer of Safety. And under this umbrella, this is just a marketing campaign, under the umbrella of Summer of Safety, we can then do cross-marketing between Bend and Commute Options, for example, or CET, just an excuse to be able to announce each other's projects and things that are happening. Maybe be able to support activities that are already coming up, specifically with Commute Options. Because it's COACT money, we may need to spend the money throughout the Tri-County region. And Commute Options is a Tri-County organization. They already have activities planned for the summer. And so, and then the other is other traditional marketing ideas, maybe billboard, maybe run public service announcements. But again, instead of spending the money creating a public service announcement, how about we just find one and just use our money to run it more often? And then the other is support for police. Literally just give the police for more overtime hours for enforcement. We all understand that education alone just does not work for all of the users of our roadways. Some folks need that slap on the wrist that a ticket might get them. So I am just, it seems like there might be coming later where we might need the MPO to approve. Is the funding coming through? And so
the funding is through us.
So we might need the board to approve when we figure out just how the funding is going to be distributed. But at this moment, just nod of heads. Does that sound like a reasonable thing to do? Would we have the support of the MPO board if we were coordinating Summer of Safety? Sound all right? Great, thank you, everyone. Yes, great.
I got a question. Do you
Sure.
know approximately how much money you're talking about here?
90,000?
Okay.
Yeah.
We've spent some of it. There's probably at least 80.
80?
I'd have to look. It's quite a
I
bit.
was just wondering.
No, of course. It's in that region where, oh boy, we could burn through a lot of it just in administration. That's another consideration. Try and stay away from that. Just get the money to the places, So thank you, Craig. Good point. All right. And the next scheduled meeting of the policy board is July 21st at noon. Has anybody got any topic requests or anything? You can always reach out to myself or Tyler in advance of that meeting. And otherwise, I will just say enjoy the beginning of summer. And thank you all so much for being here today. And thank you to staff. And one last thanks to Cameron. We'll look forward to seeing you in person as just a member of the public, Cameron.
We also have that special meeting
We do.
Oh, that's right. Thank you.
on July 6th at 1 o'clock.
Just a virtual one.
And that's just a virtual.
online.
And then the hold I have for that afternoon on my calendar, that goes away, the 2:30.
Yeah, because this one is at
For
1.
Bend
Or
MPO meeting, possible changing.
That's,
I have both of them.
you can delete that, I think. That's probably, did your administrative support plug that on your calendar?
Yeah, it's July 6th at 1. And you're right, it's a virtual meeting only, hopefully no longer than a half an hour because I'm going to be in Hawaii,
Probably about-
zooming in from the big island.
It's probably about 5 minutes.
Great, that's even better. Thank you so much, everyone. Meeting adjourned. Have a great afternoon. And Andrea will be in Italy. No, you'll be back from Italy?
On the way.
I will be back the
Yeah.
day before.
The day before. Yeah, I'm getting back the day before our council meeting. You and me both. Get it back in time. Have a marvelous time. That sounds, did you hear she's cycling through Italy?
Oh, my God.
Yeah.